Okay, good morning and welcome to Designing Healthy Environments. My name is Alicia Ponce and I'm the founder and principal of AP Monarch. We are architects and sustainability consultants. And today I am so happy to welcome two guests in the healthcare industry, design healthcare industry. One is longtime mentor, friend, and colleague, Doug King. And Doug King, he is a VP of Healthcare Project Management Advisors, Inc. And I'm joined by his research partner this morning, Jing Guo, and she is an interior designer and architect. And currently, she's the interior designer at Oklahoma State University. So, welcome. How are you?
Great.
Wonderful. So today, I'm really excited to talk about your subject matter, which is designing child-friendly spaces in healthcare. And for one, I think we've all raised children, right? And actually, I'm doing that right now. And we all see that experience in a healthcare space. What does a little child do when they're in an exam room or in a waiting room? I know what mine do. They're just like very curious, right? And they start touching things or curious and impatient. So, what does that experience show for the child, the provider, and the patient? And your research has a lot to say about that. So please share.
Be my guest, then.
Oh, so yeah, I think that do you want to start from population health? That's where pretty much where we started years ago.
Sure. Yeah. This subject came about actually through a competition that Jing won when she was a graduate student at Iowa State for a child-friendly hospital. And we incorporated it into a overall strategy we've been looking at addressing population health management. Population health management is the movement within the healthcare industry to reduce the cost of healthcare by keeping people healthy. So the better that hospitals can facilitate their patients taking ownership of their own health, the cheaper healthcare will become. And this topic fits right in with that. Because we're attempting to empower the parents to have better experiences with their own health care. So that's it.
Mm-hmm. And I think by the moment I was studying healthcare design and how children use the clinics, and it came from one of my own experience, like you said, when you bring your children into the patient room. And I was pretty nervous too, trying to have all the conversation with the doctor. And at the same time, I had to turn my head to look at my son, 4 years old. What he's doing here? Is he touching anything that he's not supposed to? So then I start to wonder, what can we do in the clinic, like that patient room in particular, to keep the children occupied, and at the same time I can focus on my conversation with the doctor. So that was the thinking how it started. So Doug and I, we started our research, and we mainly wanted to understand how, when the parents are in the patient room, so the parents are the patients, and the children come along, and how the children interact with the patients, the adults, and how the children interact with the healthcare provider. And we wanted to understand how that interaction impacts the delivery of the healthcare, the quality of it. And some of the research I'm looking at, okay, so that impact may cause the physician to make medical error, for example, and other researcher may be looking at, okay, so how often the patient's being readmitted back because something in the exam, but we were looking at the interruptions and distractions. So how if the presence of the children distract the conversation,
Right.
or if the parents or the physician were interrupted in the conversation or distracted by what the children do. So we wanted to understand all of that.
I think it's important to recognize that the terms disruption and interruption, we didn't invent. We actually got that through literature review. One of the things Jing taught me in research world, first thing we do is literature review. And we discovered only a couple of articles ever addressing this subject. And they were about 10 years previous. So we figured we were onto something when there wasn't a body of knowledge that had been developed.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. There was no body of knowledge at all, or very little. And so I would almost study a groundbreaking study in that regard. And Jing might be able to talk a little bit about the process, if you'd like, of what we went through to define what the study would be.
So our process, we did some simple questionnaires through social media, the reply pilot study, and so after that we did a research. We collected about 100 patient surveys, and we collected about 30 physician surveys. And we also did some observation at one of the clinics in Chicago. I think I'm going to talk about that too. We observed the waiting room, and we observed about 18 in the exam room where the parents and the patient, the children and the physician exist.
Jing did that. I was good Jing for that. I can see that Alicia has some questions, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's yeah, I'm glad you. I read some of the research papers that came out of it, and one thing that was interesting is that also in your research, the difference in the socioeconomic class, right? You know, that experience. Can you explain your research and where it took place, and I guess what the next steps are too as a result of that?
I'll address where it took place, and then Jing can certainly take where it goes next. She has a lot of thoughts on that. I've been fortunate to be involved with Heartland Health Centers, which is a federally qualified healthcare center in the city of Chicago. And I know, Alicia, you're busy. You work with some others. The Heartland Health was generous, allowing us access in their clinics, particularly the Vaughan clinic, to interview patients and to observe. To do that, we had to get what's called an IRB approval for our research, which meant that we had to actually take a class on how to conduct research on live patients without harming them. So Heartland Health, by nature, over 90% of their patients live below the level of poverty. And they focus primarily on immigrants and refugees in Rogers Park and in Skokie, and Edgewater. And so that, by its nature, defined the patients we were going to get. And actually, the socioeconomic level of the patients that we had were half. The average patient might make $20,000 a year. Our patients were at $10,000 a year. Was the average income that we were seeing. And so one of the thoughts we've had is that it would be interesting to do what's called a replication study in a more affluent area to see if similar levels of disruption occur in eruption. But Jing has some other thoughts on the design implications of what we did, and also maybe what other studies we might be looking to do.
So before I answer that question, so related to our demographic, I think one thing is interesting that coming from our survey, the patient experience. So we asked a question. So for the patient to rate from 1 to 10, how do you how satisfied did you feel for your visits? And that score is really really high. Although we discover there's association between distraction and interaction with the patient experience. So the more distracted they feel like, the more interrupted they feel like, the lower the patient experience overall. So that's one of the fun things. But overall, the patient experience is very high for the healthcare clinic. And so they so within the about 100 of the patients we surveyed, the majority of them are female. That kind of makes sense to me. So they bring the kids in the exam room. And some other findings that to confirm our study that 30% of the patients feel they interrupted and distracted, and the physician as well. The physician, this is an interesting finding. 50% of physician says, "Okay, I don't mind to have the children in the room," and 50 says, "Yes, I think if the kids can be out at my exam, then that will be good." So for the 50% say, "Yes, I mind," they may be saying, "Okay, sometimes the kids are there to interrupt our conversation, and I feel I'm distracted. I feel the parents are distracted. They couldn't focus on the conversation with me. And sometimes they talk about, oh, the space is too small. There's really no room for 2 or 3 kids here. And sometimes we have private things to talk about, and we can't discuss it in front of the kids." So that's pretty much the reason why from the physician, why do you think that's a good idea for them to be there? But another 50%, they generally showing understanding that, well, we know they probably don't have child care and they have to bring them here. So that kind of tied to the demographic of this group that we have studied. They have nice resources and their income, and they probably just don't have that. Yeah.
I'm so curious once you take it to a different demographic or a different class. Because for me, what I'm thinking is that kids are unapologetic no matter what your socioeconomic need is. They want mommy's attention, and they don't care if doctors talking, they want what they want. So I'm very curious about parenting. So what are some of the things that came out of this research? Okay, kids have to be with their parents, with their mom, and I imagine the research indicates like how many kids they had with them, and
Yeah.
right, because that also matters, you know. So I'm curious what discovered.
So with about 100 of this patients we surveyed, there were total 138 kids with them. So on average, they have 1.3, but some of them have 1 kid coming, some of them have 2 with them, and the majority have 1 or 2, and sometimes 3 or 4. And so we found in our observation, when they have 2, actually there's less distraction and interaction because 2 of the kids can play together.
True.
And when they have another parent, that's kind of similar story as well. And when there's only 1, it's hard to keep them engaged. And we found in our observation too, on average, after 15 minutes, they start to explore what's in the room. So almost everything in the room has been touched.
And it's predictable. Predictable. That's the key here. That would be something to study and measure, is the extreme predictability. Keep going. This is really good.
Yeah. After 15 minutes, they explore the room, and we found the things to do the most is number one, they interact with the physical environment. Mm-hmm. So 70% of their action, they're interacting with the environment. And the number two, of course, is interacting with people, so including the healthcare physicians and the nurses and the parents, so whoever in the room. So that's the second thing they do. And then other things they would do, like out of that category. Some of them bring some books and drawings and toys and of course parents, tablets. But those things we found surprisingly very minimal. And that's coming from the physician survey too. So that's their observation. They don't feel like they have provided enough activity in the ABC term. More than 60% of the physicians feel that way. And more than 60% of the parents feel that way too. And what about patients themselves? And surprisingly, 2 out of the 18 of the observation we did, they had brought some kind of toy with them. So we just wondering maybe they were too in a hurry, or visiting the exam room is nervous enough, stressful enough for them to think about other things. So I feel like the clinic themselves, if we do something, provide some activity for the children, that will be really great.
And on that note, it was ironic that Jing and I were doing much of our conversations in the research at a Life Fitness gym in her town, Edmond, Oklahoma, because Gabriel, her son, would come with us, and he could go in their child care room or playroom and be entertained while we were sitting in the dining area of the fitness center, being able to focus on it. And it was ironic. And the irony, what's that?
Research also was in a Life Fitness?
No, that's where we worked.
Oh.
We would sometimes work there because we could eat and sit and talk, and it was near the hotel I was at. And the irony didn't escape me, because one of the things that we looked at, and I was hoping we might take to the next step, is whether or not child care could be a justifiable expense for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or particularly for FQHCs. Facilities that are treating individuals who live below the level of poverty are in an inequitable environment, could possibly be, maybe there could be a financial incentive for institutions to provide meaningful child care beyond the table in the waiting room with the overused coloring books, that many of us have seen. And that was a thought, and that is actually consistent with how change happens in healthcare through research. One of the messages we wanted to leave the audience was the importance of research and funded research in the healthcare industry. And for example, organizations such as the Center for Health Design, which are a repository for that research, and using those services as the result.
Yeah, I think that's a great, as a parent, I would like to explore that,
Sure.
That when we go there, some places have nooks that aren't quite exciting, Well, we've actually worked on a couple of clinics, and we make them child friendly. Even working with scale, of design, and have building a little environment for them so that they can play doctor, or it's very engaging. Not, it's not adults there, and it already just pulls them in. So I haven't seen yet my doctor to engage my children with those colors that don't even look, that they're cracked. So I think that's such an interesting find while you were just debriefing.
I think, and Zane can talk more on the design, but I think healthcare, pediatric facilities have taken this very far. And the idea is, can we do a crossover to the regular outpatient world, the ambulatory care world, which is going to become the predominant healthcare delivery world in the future. So, Jing, did you want to pick up on that at all?
Coming from our study, so we did ask the patients and the physician, what do they like to see if this is a child-friendly clinic? And I think number one thing they mentioned is activity that clinic can provide. So the majority mentioned activity, including like books, activities, and many of them mentioned a TV could be very helpful. That kind of make sense. And some other things include toys. I think it's about 70% of the respondents suggested toys can be incorporated in the exam room. And electronic devices could be some kind of screen type of the devices. And other things, so those are the majorities. And other things they mentioned, sometimes you may need a baby seat. Not a lot of infants in our study who have observed anyway. Mostly when they bring infant, they have a car seat to bring with them. But occasionally they may not have that. So that could be very helpful. And some parents also suggested, it will be good to have a babysitter. So we kind of, I think that seems like the physician, the 50% of physician would prefer to. But if you can leave your kids out of the exam room environment, that will be very helpful in some situation. The tie to Doug's suggestion.
So those are my personal experience. I could not leave my kids with anyone, so I had to reschedule because I asked my doctor's office, can I bring this on my daughter? And they said, no, it's better if you reschedule.
Wow.
I missed, I had to reschedule. And so I guess it does depend on who's your doctor and where you care. But I also thought of another thing, that they're dentists. Different type of environment, but their dentists, they have a technology, right? They even put a toilet when they're done. And then because they were so good, they give them orders. And when they leave, you can pick what toy they can choose. So they look forward to that experience. And as a parent, I can sit back and relax, and then the doctor can do what they need to do. So everybody's happy. That's one very win experience.
Alicia, you bring up a really good point. The dental community has been my experience as well. Seems to have figured this out. piece of it. I don't, I can't speak for, we haven't studied every dental clinic in the U.S., but this is not the first time that I've heard about a creative, child-friendly experience in a dental clinic. And so they're probably used to dealing with, kids.
Yeah, I mean, but the difference is that the child is receiving the care and not the adult. If I were to go, then my children would not be allowed, probably. So, it's something to consider, like use some of their strategies.
I would underscore one thing we maybe didn't stress, but the importance, and you talked about it just now, the importance of that visit with your physician. I mean, if you're going to go meet, if a person's going to go meet with, say, I don't know, an advisor like lawyer or some other personal advisor, typically we don't have our kids alone. So it kind of struck me, why do we do this in the healthcare environment? It's certainly as important as any other personal advisor we might have in our lives. So, and then the other thing that surprised me about the entire subject was the lack of focus on it, understanding that this is actually not a United States focused thing. This is a worldwide thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a World Health Organization level conversation at some point, because kids are all over the world, parents are all over the world, parents seeing their physicians, if they're fortunate. I mean, that there are some countries obviously where that's a huge luxury, but this is a phenomenon that has broader implications. But before I forget, I want to give a call out and a thank you to my previous employer, Stantec, for providing an innovation and creativity grant to allow us to do parts of this study. So I got to do the plug there because we were grateful. Yes. Getting funding was an interesting experience on and on in itself in research.
But that's how we learn, right? By observation, and you were in the trenches, Gene.
It was.
How long were you doing this research?
Oh, that's a great question. Go for it, Jane.
So we, Doug mentioned it started from my graduate student competition project. So it back to 4 or 5 years. And I continued with Doug in 2016, I would say. So yeah, it's been 4 or 5 years. And when I was teaching in a kind of more academic environment, I devoted a lot more time to it. And now I'm more a practitioner in the interior design field. That's become really less, but it's never, we have never stopped on that subject. We wanted to really understand this, and because we wanted to, our previous research wanted to define this problem really clearly. So from our surveys, pretty strongly telling us that if the parents rate from 1 to 10 scale, to what extent you feel distracted, and that number is around saying 6 and 7, and the interruption of conversation, and that's about the same number. So we can tell they were quite impacted because of interaction of the children. So we defined that problem with confidence right now. And the next step, we would want to figure out some of the design interventions to help address that. And I think I'll continue to talk about the design solution. Some of the thinking actually relate to our observation. So the kids like to interact with the environment, right? The most popular things is the medical stools. So they did a lot of fun things around that piece of furniture. And I think so something designed around that. So this is very conceptual right now. So we were thinking, so why not that piece of the stool can become a toy as well. So it could be designed to be more safe for the children to work around it. And the surface could be more cleanable. I think it's cleanable already. So we can constantly wipe them and so for them to feel, don't get infection or touch stuff on it. So those some design thinkings could be incorporated in the design. So look at the furniture pieces and what children can do on it and use it as a toy already if they don't have other resources. So I think that's a very conceptual concept. We think about all of this research.
Because the stool is right at their scale, so and it rolls, it moves. So it's probably one of the more fun objects in the room. If they can access then the other tools to check your ear, and that's
Exam table too had some you could call on it depending on your age. That had some interest. The wastebasket, which was a little scary when we thought about it. One thing I wanted to just clarify was our research. It's taken several years, but it was like a 1-year intensive period where we visited the facility 3 occasions per week, and that was within the funding cycle. Obviously, the funding that we got that helped pay for that activity. So that was the driver. I would say we spent a year on the population health side, and then doing the paperwork to allow the study to happen, getting the approvals, and then a year doing the study, and then now we've been spending time preparing the write-up and the statistical analysis, which is what Jim was doing.
I'm definitely intrigued by the research. Therefore, my mind is rushing with so many, ideas, even, from stemming from my own experience. And like, what is that experience, even at check-in, right? When you're registering in, the counter is up here, and then your little one is down here, right? And doing what? Like, what are they tugging at your shoulder? So what is their experience at eye level, right? To just start to engage them into the space. Like, is there a fish tank around? Is there, something like that? Can we do that in an exam room? Like even a fishbowl, something, it can be made really fun. And like, we believe that everyone has a right to a space that brings them joy, right? You should feel joy when you walk into a space, especially when you're going into the doctor.
It's an interesting choice of words, because when Jim presented, she, by the way, is being very modest. I get the topic of child-friendly healthcare. She won a national design competition. She was a student, so she was being very humble here. But when she spoke at the healthcare design conference a couple of years ago, one of the major healthcare designs, I think joy was the operative word, right?
Yes.
Go for it. Yeah.
So I think the main concept here for designing a child-friendly clinic, the keyword is joyful, the keyword is home feel. So I address home feel. I don't want to say home life. I wanted to say, so when children are at home, they not bored. They get bored too, but they often not get bored because there's so many things they can do at their house. So they get occupied. So I think a setting that where children get involved by being at, we should create that home feel that we provide them a lot of opportunity to learn, to engage, and so their attention can be drawn by something that's educational, joyful, and a joyful place with bright colors, with happy symbols. I think when adults see these, we feel happy too. So that was my main concept when I won the competition. I think it's applicable for creating any environment to make it joyful.
Right. And I agree. It's how you feel too. How you want to feel. You want it to look good, feel good, and perform well. So it's really important. When you're in a doctor's office, and if you're going through something physical, but then there's also something going on up here too. Like, what is it for your mental well-being? I don't know if you have anything to share, and what we're going through now, the pandemic, right? And what is your research? Where is it going to take you post-pandemic? Can you add something to that?
I was going to just add, one of the implications of the pandemic has been the movement of patient care to the virtual environment, telecommunications. Ireland, for example, about 40% of their visits last year were done virtual, and most of those were done after April. In fact, almost every visit after April was virtual. And I'm not sure what Jing thinks, but we haven't addressed this, but I think having a virtual visit at home could have similar challenges. I mean, it has its own unique challenges, but being able to maintain that and use the word sanctity of the visit, is still an important thing, even if it's a home visit. So I don't know if you have anything on that. I've only experienced a couple of virtual visits of my own.
I haven't. I have not.
I have. Yeah. It was just like this. I'm like doing a podcast.
But then, it's not like the, let me check, open your mouth, say,
right.
Doing the temperature checks, right?
Right. And Jing, you were going to say, yeah, go for it.
I think one thing people relate to this, that even before the pandemic, when we take the kids to the exam room, they worry about the things they touch and what they're going to bring to them and home. And I think that might be another reason why we wanted to have a designated area for the kids when they have to come with their friends. Or think in another way. We thought about another design intervention maybe they could incorporate in the clinic setting is using the whiteboard concept. So the whiteboard that physicians and nurses can use right now, and a activity that children really like to do is writing and drawing. So we could have that, for example, on the a writing wall kind of concept, just provide them a big whiteboard so they can interact with the environment that is designed for them. But it may have the concerned that, okay, so all the kids are touching that whiteboard, they're writing down letters, they're touching the markers, and that could have been the safety issue as well. But I think that the next step for us, we wanted to explore something like that, the design based on understanding what kids wants to do, and then still keep it safe.
Like a mock-up setting. So if you, Alicia, hit one of many FQHCs that might want to test some ideas out, we should talk. Yeah. Because it sounds like in your design work, we could test some of this out and actually do, a simple study to see what would be working.
It's really fun to discover, where the opportunities are, right?
Yeah.
We did that for a teen center design. We used a chalkboard wall in the restroom, right? Teenagers are yet another, going through their own, things, and sometimes they have to express themselves. So we suggested, why don't we do a chalkboard wall in the restroom, and so that was really successful. Just how to find the little opportunities to engage and make that doctor's visit less scary or less painful, or whatever that may be. There's like a certain mindset, I think, when you go to the doctor. Would you agree with that? Like it's something, there's something wrong with me, or I want them to fix this. It's just.
Yeah.
It's not like when you go to an amusement park
or the grocery store.
Or the grocery store, right? Your mind switches to something else, And,
I really like the keyword of engage. I think designing for the environment where the kids involved and designing to be engaged in what would be the adjective to it. Engaging environment. I think that's the key word.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one thing in before I forget. One of the things that I got as an architect working with Jing in the research process was understanding what a true research process is. Versus what, and I'll say that the interior design programs, particularly, she went to Iowa State, which has an excellent program, but I know there are others. The interior design programs I've been affiliated with have really taught the research methodology well. Okay, and as an architect, I'm not sure if the architecture programs are following suit across the country in that regard. But I benefited greatly and actually use on a frequent basis the process that Jing taught me, through the process of doing this study. So I just want to point that out to all the architects out there, team up with your interior design. Give that amazing training. That's
that's an excellent point, Doug, and I'm so glad that you brought it up, because that is what creates a healthy environment, when we can collaborate and cross-pollinate between, expertise, specialties, and that's what really provides a sound solution, one of the best solutions that you can for your client, right? When you learn from people like you, when you learn from people like Doug, I met you 20 plus years ago now, for those. It's like Doug met me at my very new stages of, springing off into the architectural world, and here we are speaking about healthcare design.
Yeah, 20 years later, we're in Feinberg Aldi together.
Yes, and yes, and it was such a great team, such a great experience, and I'm very grateful for that. It just helped me grow as an architect, embark on this architectural journey.
Yeah, absolutely. You've taken it a long way. Yeah.
a lot of fun with it. And I want to thank the both of you for your time, for sharing your research and insights on the subject, which will never go away, in my opinion. We will always need to look at our healthcare spaces and how to, improve them, right, for our ever-changing health needs. One is being the pandemic and what comes after that, because there's always something that will appear. And so I'd like to thank the both of you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. So next week, we are going to talk about water. We have the Commissioner of Metropolitan Water Rep, Josina Morita, water and her advocacy work on, how as architects and designers we can continue to conserve water, find ways and way we design. That is a challenge for us in Chicago and the state of Illinois. So we're gonna keep plugging away. So have a wonderful, healthy day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Bye.